Okay, we are unmuted, so people can check their sound system.
Engineers that I hope they would understand that.
Sam, I'm going to ask you just one last time, if you don't mind doing a sound check for us online.
Sounds good from here.
Great, Sam. Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, good morning, everyone. It is 10:30, so we will call our meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone today and just remind everyone that since we do have people participating virtually, please state your name before speaking so everyone online knows who you are. If you're not on the committee, please keep your cameras off, microphones muted. Please ask the chair to be recognized to speak. As always, Amy will be monitoring our chat and raise your hand features. And Basque is being live streamed for the public on KBOR's YouTube channel. I also want to just state that although our agenda says that we'll run until 12, we really are trying to get out of here before 11:50, if at all possible, so that we can walk over to the Capitol building with our group. So I would ask everyone, certainly give all of our matters today the kind of discussion and attention that they deserve, but let's try to be efficient with our discussions as well as and mindful of the time as we try to keep that early ending time in mind. And if we can get out, even sooner than that, the better. Amy, would you please call roll for committee members and our main presenters?
Yes, thank you. So we do have Regent Kiblinger.
Here.
Regent Lane.
Present.
Regent Mendoza.
Present.
Regent Benson.
Here.
Thank you. And then to presenters today, we do have Barbara Bickelmeyer.
And I believe Kim Warren or Stuart Day will be presenting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bickelmeyer.
Thank you. So we have Kim or Stuart Day, and then we have Tara Labar.
I'm here.
Thank you. And Daniel Archer is unable to attend today, and that completes roll call.
All right, thank you. Amy, do you know then, will we be receiving a Math Pathways update from another staff member, or will that agenda item be postponed?
I think we were hoping that we could postpone that since he's more of the expert on that, has been a part of that math working group. If we could postpone that, that would probably be better.
Okay, we'll plan on doing that. Please note that we'll be moving that agenda item to our next meeting. All right, our first item of business is to approve the minutes from our January 31st meeting. So if we have a motion to that effect.
I would so move.
Moved by Regent Benson, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Regent Mendoza. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to our discussion agenda, and Regent Lane, who has led the work on our strategic plan Pillar 1 dashboard foundational indicators, will give us an update as we prepare to move that forward for the discussion agenda to the full board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And let me start by extending my gratitude to the KBORD team and to all the provost and the various research data folks at our campuses. They have provided a lot of time and effort to help us move the dashboard forward. So I'm going to move through the opening slides fairly quickly. You all are very familiar with what we're trying to accomplish to build on what is currently in the Build a Future Strategic Plan pillars. You'll note that there are 3 pillars. one about helping Kansas families, supporting Kansas business, and advancing economic prosperity. At our July retreat, the board determined that having a dashboard, which would serve, if you will, somewhat like a scorecard, to help us keep our eyes on the kinds of things we're trying to focus on for Kansas families, would be helpful. And they task us, Regent Kiblinger and myself, President Muma and President Ship, to begin putting together a framework of what a Pillar 1 dashboard might look like. So we're focusing this effort on Pillar 1. And if you take a look at the slide that shows the build a future structure, we wanted to build on that structure, not make any changes. So the existing plan had in it the areas and themes under Pillar 1 of affordability, access, and success. We know those are critical to Kansas families. We've made no recommendations for change there. You'll see underneath each of those areas a bullet point that shows the existing indicators. Later today, we'll hear Dr. Flanders' report on our progress, and he may mention those indicators that are there. So the framework was built with the thought in mind that we would strengthen and add to the existing indicators. So the next slide says evolved metrics. I just want to hover here a minute and ask you to provide any feedback. The way we approached the work was to think about what are the metrics that we want to look at on an annual basis that show we are achieving affordability, access, and success. So the foundational metrics, trying to change my language because I used to call them indicators, but we're embracing the term metrics, are those that you look at in the rearview mirror. They are annual indicators. They are things that we want to achieve, but they're hindsight, if you will. So those are the ones that we're focused on today, and we'll be asking you all to approve and then the full board to approve the suggested indicators. Yet to be built are the support indicators. Those are the indicators that are more actionable, that we're hoping that BASC and the full board will leverage on a regular basis to determine whether or not the promising practices, the best practices that we've asked for the system to embrace are actually moving the needle. And so when we get to those indicators, it'll be very important to know that a lot of that information may be brand new collections, and we'll have to be mindful of ensuring that we have leveraged the right balance of indicators that'll tell us that we're moving forward. In essence, they predict how we're doing on the foundational metrics. So let me just pause there and ask for your feedback. Does that make sense? Or is there anything at this point you'd like to shape in that?
So we would foresee that those metrics would be smaller and more laser-like in focus, whereas the ones that are the foundational provide a broader picture. Is that a fair way to summarize some of that?
Yes, and I would add to that, the support indicators are things that we influence and change and can adjust and monitor quickly.
Absolutely.
So it would be like your speedometer on your car. Are you giving the right pressure? Are you staying out of the, cautious, I'm looking at you. Are you being, so those are the kinds of things that we can change and amend as we go. The foundational would be set in place as those things that every year we're going to say, are we making progress? So an example of a potential support indicator might be, have we implemented centralized professional advising? Has every student received contact from an advisor? That kind of thing. Okay, so thinking about that structure, then what we're focused on now are solely the annual or foundational metrics. I'm not going to go through each of those in detail. I'll just answer any questions you might have, but you'll see that there are several associated with affordability. There are several with access, and then there are fewer with success, simply because success is the outcome. So there are a lot of indicators, and one of the things I've been wondering about, and Chair Rolfe asked me this right before our meeting today, is are there too many? Now, there are some that are closely related to each other. For example, on PACE, we'll be looking at full-time students and part-time students. So in my thinking, that's one indicator with two parts. And the same would go in our examination of developmental ed. There are 3 indicators. 1, looking at the traditional. 2nd, looking at co-requisite. And the 3rd, students that don't have either of those. And examining, are our efforts decreasing the amount of developmental that's needed? Is co-requisite successful? And how are those students doing as compared to others who don't need support? So that's how it's structured. I'm just going to ask you to comment, take us to any indicator that you want to discuss. You can see on how the slides were laid out, which sectors are impacted, who we are looking to ask for. One last comment. Most of the data in the foundational indicators are things that we already collect. In fact, I think almost all, if not all. So questions, comments, feedback would be most welcome.
Well, Regent Lane, great work on this. To your last point, can you recall what would be a new indicator that we have not previously tracked?
You know, as I said that I was backtracking on that because I believe we're collecting all. There might be some slight nuances in the language used, but the data is available. So if I can confirm that with your data team. Amy, would you mind sending a message to Cindy and asking her to confirm that? Thank you.
And I would just comment regarding the number of metrics. You know, I think if we're going to provide a thorough overview of our system and the progress that we're making toward our goals, to me, this is the number that's really required to be able to fully understand that data at a glance so that you have enough depth that you can see the interrelationship among the different metrics. So I think if we were to try to pare it down, we would begin to lose some of the complexity and nuances that are important for our decision making.
Now, much of this ties to the work that Georgia State did, and frankly, some of our institutions, since Provost LeBeer is in the room, I'll say Wichita's already been collecting all this. And so this to them was, and the feedback we received from that particular institution was these are on point, things that we need to know. And if the Regents doesn't collect them, they are. So thank you for that comment. Would it be helpful for me just to quickly hit each indicator so we can talk about them? Okay.
Sure.
Do you mind if I jump in with Cindy's response for
Oh,
you?
please, that'd be
Okay.
great.
So Cindy says the data is being collected already, except for those meta measures, and that has not been fully defined yet. So there will be a lag in the co-requisite Dev Ed data, but we did do a pilot in that 2022.
Okay.
So those meta measures are
Thank you. Right. Why you need a team. Okay, so Amy, if you go to slide 6, the first indicator is under affordability is attrition rates. And this is to really focus on encouraging better advising. This is focusing on students. For you all, it would be slide 6, probably page, I don't know, page 3 or 4, indicator 1. Really, we want to intervene on this prior to the dropping out, but we need to analyze how many students are not continuing from their first year to their second year so we can analyze whether or not we need additional resources and supports. So that's the first indicator. Second indicator, sufficient course load. And this is gauging whether or not students are taking enough credit hours to actually complete in a 5-year term. And there's a lot of conversation on this particular indicator because we have a lot of students who work, right? So we want to look at the 30 hours, and then you'll see later we're also looking at the part-time student on pace. So attrition rates and sufficient course load. Any feedback or comments on either of those? Okay, we follow it with the on pace, which is to look at full-time. This particular indicator looks at full-time students, monitoring their progress towards graduation. And really it builds on the previous metrics that we just talked about to measure whether students are progressing at a pace to graduate on time. Here we're looking at first year students and then tracking those students through the 5 years to see if they've earned enough credits. Indicator 4 is on-time pace for the part-time students, very similar to the previous indicator, but just looking at students who are enrolled in less than a full credit hour load. I might note here that this, there was some conversation around whether or not we would be counting developmental students in this. We are not counting developmental students who require that, because frankly, that's not credit bearing. So, but the field had asked that question. And the next affordability indicator, indicator number 5, takes a look at the average student loan amount to graduate. Even though we don't necessarily have control over this, that was some of the dialogue and feedback received by the field. We do know that it is critically important to help our students and families plan wisely so that, number one, they're willing to enter into post-secondary, and number 2, when they complete, that they are not underwater. There's no change in this metric, and this is a metric that we've been looking at for some time now. Indicator number 6 looks at the default rate for those same loans. And a major concern for families and may be a barrier for some students seeing that post-secondary is important to their future planning. It's an existing metric, and it's one that is required by our federal government to report. So that's why you see the little triangle on the upper left-hand corner of that slide, is because we've already been tracking that information. Indicator number 7 is about needs-based aid and grants and scholarships dollars awarded to Kansas families. And the metric would give us an opportunity to understand whether or not we have adequate amounts of need-based funds to ensure affordability. As a side note, I think we've talked about the fact that Kansas is well below even our surrounding states in terms of the amount of need-based aid we provide. So this will give us data to be able to really monitor total amount of needs-based aid. And then tied with it is indicator number 8, which really examines whether or not the students who receive the aid are completing in 5 years. So 7 was about, are you receiving aid? Do we have enough aid? Do we have more requests than we can fulfill? And number 8 is it having the impact that we desire? Then indicator number 9 is about our Pell eligible students, and really it's taking a look at what gaps exist for students who are Pell eligible as compared to families without that financial need. It's an existing metrics, and the definitions have not changed since the inception of the Build a Future plan. And then indicator 10 was the one that Amy and Cindy was so gracious to point out. This would be a brand new indicator once built, but we're not ready there. But we did want to signal to the field that we want to suggest that we look at this data. So I'll pause before we talk about the indicators that move into access. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Indicator number 11 is where we begin our conversation about access. And this was looking specifically at enrollment equity gaps and to reduce those gaps as compared to the Kansas population. So really focusing on what's our population in Kansas. We know it's really evolving and changing, and whether or not our enrollment reflects the population that we serve. Indicator 12, college going rates. This is to encourage participation. We could tie this to the work of the concurrent committee that we have working, trying to figure out how to create those seamless pathways from K-12 into post-secondary. Most of the feedback was we have to get KSDE on board. We acknowledge that, we understand that. Without their participation, we won't be able to move the needle here. So there's some data challenges that we have between the two systems, and there's also strategy challenges that we'll need to take on. I think you all have talked, and we've talked quite a bit about, my passion around this. If we really want to have people see that post-secondary is necessary for the vision they have for what they want to do in life, we've got to get down into the K-12 system. So indicator 12 is all about tracking that, and the indicator 13 is about concurrent and dual enrollment. So those two, in essence, pair together. Again, require a strong partnership with KSDE and building on the successes we've seen in Senate Bill 155 or Excel and CTE. So when we get to indicator 14, it has the A, B, and C sections. The one I alluded to in the intro, they're all about developmental ed. The first one is taking a look at measuring traditional developmental ed and to understand the impact it has on success for students. 14B is specifically examining co-requisite method and to understand the impact it has. And then the 14C is examining a comparison group of students who receive neither traditional or co-requisite remediation. You could look at these three indicators and say, are we moving the needle on moving away from developmental ed to co-requisite 1? And is that actually impacting students in Kansas? We know nationally the data is really strong, but we want to focus on what's the impact for our students here in Kansas. So that's the end of access. Any comments, questions, input?
I would just further say, I think 14 is a great example of that, where if you would eliminate any of these, you also eliminate those nuances and complexities that you need to understand to really have the information you need for decision making as you move the system forward. So I just think that it's just another example of that point that I made, and again, really good work on just the amount of thought that went into this and defining all of these.
Appreciate that. I have to just go back to the data team here. Really helpful in applying their science and their thinking to what we're trying to achieve. So the last group of indicators are about success. There are three of those indicators. Here's our persistent rate, which looks at transfers and completions. It's kind of the counterbalance to the first indicator, which was about attrition and dropping out. So we want to monitor progress towards success across the institutions. It's an existing metric, and you can see in the gold box, it's a system-wide collection that we'll be looking at across not only our universities, but our coordinated institutions. Indicator 16 is a graduation and jobs with sustaining wages. This is pointing directly toward our goal to ensure that we are awarding certificates and degrees. Frankly, I wish to think bigger, that every Kansan should have a certificate or credential or a of some sort to thrive in our current economy. So this is an existing metric. We had robust feedback on this particular indicator. Much of that was because of the communities we have in our border states, and thinking that many of the successful graduates, particularly from our two-year institutions, find themselves across the borders in states where we don't collect the financial comparative data. So this is an area that we might ask fiscal affairs and audit to discuss, looking at a cost benefit analysis in order to decide if we want to expand beyond Kansas and Missouri in this indicator and look at other surrounding states. There's a lot of data security issues related to that. So it may be out of the purview of this committee, but certainly I'd welcome your thoughts about asking fiscal or governance to take this on a little bit deeper. So
How difficult has it traditionally been to get other states' information when we requested?
from what I understand, it is challenging. We don't have agreements with the other immediate surrounding states, and there's the quality of data issue, the capacity of our team to actually ensure and clean the data, and also some cyber risk with the data. So be thinking about, and so this afternoon when we talk to the full board about it, if you're all supportive, then Chair Kiblinger, I would suggest that we ask one of these committees to take it up.
Yeah, to consider that.
And then the last success indicator number 17 is about degrees and certificates earned. This is unduplicated. I think the nuance here is that we have some students who graduate with more than one degree. We will count the highest degree or certificate earned, not duplicate in the count. So next steps, certainly need your approval, need the approval of the full board. The plan, if we do obtain approval this afternoon from the full board, is that the dashboard site will go live. We'll have Matt Keith with us this afternoon so that he can show the board what that dashboard's going to look like, where it's going to land on our landing page. It'll go live with those indicators that were in the existing plan, and then the team will continue to add the other indicators that are new that we're approving. And then the next big wave of work, which I anticipate will result in some interesting and meaningful dialogue across the system, are those support indicators. What are the few things we want on our scoreboard that we're going to keep our eye on that connect to our promising practices and that we can influence and change to make sure our foundational metrics are achieved?
Cindy, thank you very much for the report and all the work that you have done, as well as, again, KBOR staff members beyond at our universities that have also assisted with this, presidents, provosts, data staff. We couldn't have done this without you. Any other questions or comments? And if not, we're looking for a motion to move this forward for the full board's discussion and hopeful approval later today.
I would move to.
And I would second.
All right, moved by Regent Mendoza, second by Regent Benson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved. Thank you. Next, under other matters, KU requesting an exception to the baccalaureate degree policy definition. And we have,
Yes, hello.
are you?
I'm Stuart Day, Dean of the Edwards Campus and School of Professional Studies, and we have Vice Provost Jen Ross on the call as well, and Associate Dean Kim Warren, who can present briefly on this proposal, if that's okay with you.
Certainly. Dean Day, please make your presentation.
Great. Go ahead, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take it. I'm Kim Warren, Associate Dean of the Edwards Campus and School of Professional Studies at KU. And very briefly, we are seeking to amend KBOR's definition of a bachelor's degree to apply more than 60 hours from a community college for the KU degree housed at Lawrence or Edwards, and to do so without a transfer agreement. I want to point out that KU and KU Edwards and Johnson County Community College actually got approval to run a pilot program, a 2-year study. And we found that with this kind of program, that outcomes were improved for students transferring from community college into KU Edwards programs, that students still took upper division courses from the university, and overall it improved the student experience in terms of accessibility. It decreased what we call transfer shock, which is kind of a shock academically. So that was decreased. There were much better completion rates, and this specifically impacted at a greater rate first generation students and students of color. So KU's request is again to amend KBOR's definition of a bachelor's degree. The residency requirements, 30 hours, and upper division requirements, 45 hours, would remain in place. This revision would, as I said, increase access to degrees at KU, maintain the rigor of a KU degree, but better equalize transfer between 2-year and 4-year institutions. It would certainly relieve the administrative burden of creating multiple transfer agreements for each community college. Although we recognize that in some cases, a transfer agreement might still need to be necessary. But we think that overall, this would be a really excellent way to improve accessibility, improve enrollment, increase enrollment. This proposal has the support of KU Faculty Senate. And we really would like to see your endorsement as well as a strategy to help increase enrollment in bachelor degree programs.
Yeah, and I can just thank you, Kim, and I can just add, very briefly, what this really does is say we respect the courses that students have taken at community colleges. And so right now you can come in, if you're transferring to KU from Baker, you can transfer in everything you've done. But if you're transferring in from a community college in the state and you have more than 60 hours, beyond your 60 hours doesn't get counted. So you may have taken a course that is in the transfer system that absolutely should count, that we value at University of Kansas. And so we're trying to make that possible. So it's very pro student, it's very pro 2-year. And so we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Warren, Dr. Day. Questions from the regents? So I have just a few questions to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So our previous policy applied to only programs that were on the KU Edwards campus, and this would apply not only to the KU Edwards campus, but to the Lawrence campus as well. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And we explicitly did it as a pilot, a KBOR pilot for Edwards with Johnson County Community College, and then did some extension with Kansas City, Kansas Community College. This would allow it to happen for all Lawrence and Edwards programs at University of Kansas.
Okay. And I had another question and I just forgot what it was because it was one that I thought of and then didn't write down. As far as, but this is still limited by if there's not something that's going to count because it's not part of the degree program, you still have those requirements in place. The higher level courses in the degree program are still going to obviously guide whether or not a degree is earned or not.
Absolutely. And really what this is, it tends to be a course or two extra for students that we can just get them, that much more acknowledgement of the work they've done. But it doesn't reduce significantly the amount of time and the amount of courses they'll take at University of Kansas. It does give them a little more flexibility. It gives them a reason to stay in the state. But yeah, it's not a huge impact on the number of credit hours at the University of Kansas. And of course, we think we'll also be able to attract a few more students doing this.
So my next question is for KBOR staff. What's the process then that this went through as far as input from our other universities? Did they have any opportunity to?
It was
Talk
discussed at COCO in the chief academic officers meeting, and they're the ones that suggested that FAST be the next step.
Bring it here. And Provost DeFever, was that well received then in COCO?
I do think we have some provosts who want to speak on this issue, but
Yes.
I think one of the conversations that we had is that we would like for it to apply to any institution, not simply KU.
And that really is going to be my next question is everybody interested in it? And are there unintended consequences and therefore you're not interested in it? So I would be very interested to hear on that topic from our provosts that are online.
Regent Kiblinger, this is Chuck Tabor from K-State. And as Shirley said, we certainly support this as optional. I agree with everything that Stuart just said. This is student friendly. It provides opportunities for pathways. So providing the option to allow us to accept credits beyond that limit is in our interest and in students' interests.
Thank you, Provost Tabor. Others?
Regent Kiblinger, this is Brent Thomas, Emporia State.
Yes.
I would concur with Chuck's comments. You know, we like this idea, and we would love to have the same option and the flexibility on our end as well.
Thank you.
Provost Kiblinger, this is Howard Smith at Pitt State.
Yes.
We also support this and think it would be nice for it to be permissive enough that all the Regents institutions could use it.
Any others?
Yes, good morning. This is Angela Poole-Funai from Fort Hays State University. I'm standing in for Provost Arnsdorf, who couldn't be here today. And we
Yes.
also are supportive of the proposal, and we also like to ask that it not be an exception, but be extended to all of our KBOR universities.
All right, thank you. I think that accounts for
Unanimous.
everyone. So my question then is, should we move this forward, or is the appropriate next step to say, send it back to everyone and say, if we are supportive at BASC, to say, instead of approving this, let us approve something that is broader and for everyone?
It sounds like there's universal support for this to apply, and I assume that means from any community college into any university, right?
And without articulation agreements, transfer agreements is the right term there, in place. I think it's a wonderful policy. The word permissive was stressed several times. I would certainly agree. We would not want to force this on any institution or program, but
Just to clarify, from my view, this does not impact the 120 credit hour to degree measure, right? It just
Correct.
increases
That's
the amount of
absolutely correct.
courses to transfer.
yeah, it would just increase what could potentially be transferred to count toward those 120. Do we need a motion directing you to take this back and make it apply system-wide and bring a revised policy to us?
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you could word that motion correctly today to include all, and it could proceed.
Okay,
Coco has had a chance to discuss. They are unanimous in that.
okay.
So depending on the wording of the motion.
So I will take a stab at that motion myself. I would move that we direct KBOR staff to take this proposal from KU, draft policy language to make this permissive amongst all the universities in our system. Run that, by the provost and, of course, get their feedback before sending it on to the full board for their discussion. Does that cover everything that you think needs to be in there?
So
That's my motion,
Question, yeah.
Regent Lee.
Do we need to go through that process if we're hearing their voices today that says amend the language so that it is applied across the system?
To me,
I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking
to-
about
to
how do we
me,
get
I'd
rid of
like
the
to
step?
at least see, I would think they would want to see
See
it
the
to at
language.
least
Is that your
give it a nod.
All right, then I'll second your motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. I think this is a wonderful suggestion and will be of great benefits to students. And thank you to all of our provosts who have thoughtfully considered this as something that would also be worth doing at your own universities. All right. Moving ahead, Tara Labar, Apply Kansas Annual Report.
Yes. Good morning. I'm going to pull up my presentation here for you. That ready to show. You can see the abbreviated version, or maybe the condensed version of the report in your agenda. And as I've done in years past, I've kind of broken that out into pieces, and I'll be presenting the parts of that today for you about our fall Apply Kansas campaign that was held last October. So let's see, here we go. Great. Okay, so just as a review, a reminder, Apply Kansas is our statewide application completion event. We are the Kansas extension of the National American College Application Campaign. There are 51 of these events across the country that happen in the fall each year. So we're the Kansas chapter. And the American College Application Campaign is an arm of ACT Center for Equity in Learning. And so they kind of oversee all of the state coordinators and provide a lot of great resources and training to us as state coordinators that we again can turn around and give to our site coordinators out across the state. This is KBOR's third year running the program here in-house. It's our fifth year funding and supporting the program across the state. And for all of the application programs across the state of Kansas, the goal is to all of the programs across the country, the goal is to increase the number of students who apply to college early in the fall of their senior year. And also we want a specific focus on supporting students of color, low income, first generation, and others who otherwise may not apply to college. So that's always kind of our guiding light with regard to our application campaigns as we go through. So when I meet and train our Kansas site coordinators, these are the three required components. And essentially, you know, as a former school counselor myself, I am a big believer in empowering the counselors because they know their communities, they know their students, they know, and I firmly believe they're already doing a lot of these pieces in their high schools. So I don't have any magic secrets, but there's a lot of power in networking and connection and sharing resources. And that's what I think the power of Apply Kansas is. So as the state coordinator, my goal is to provide as many resources and many connections as I can to our state coordinators. And at the same time, I don't want to tell anyone there's one way to do this. In fact, I would argue there's a lot of ways Apply Kansas happens across the state. And that's been the most fun thing for me to see happen. So basically the three required components that I teach every fall is, number one, you need to create an event with at-risk students in mind. So we've already talked about who those at-risk students are, but one of the things that I do each year is I try to push those site coordinators a little bit past the traditional definitions, and I get them to think about who are the at-risk students in their school, in their community, who's flying under the radar, who's not filling out applications. And every year that could look different. You know, as we came out of the pandemic, some schools that looked like students who were chronically absent. You know, again, if you're not in school, it's hard to fill out applications on an application event day. So we talked about a lot of different types of students in our training sessions. And that was, again, the power of kind of getting together and talking about those things. So we want to create an event with those at-risk students in mind. And my hope is that as they continue in the program, they're always thinking each year, who can I reach this year? Who can I grab? Who can I do a better job with this year as I plan for Apply Kansas? The second thing they have to do in Apply Kansas is they have to collect some summary data. In a minute, I'm going to show you all the numbers. That's the result of this summary data. And so I say, hey, this is the hard part. This is not the fun part, but I need you to collect some data from every senior that's participating in your Apply Kansas program. And I try to make that as easy as possible for them. And number three, the required component is they need to celebrate every completed application. And every application means university application, means job application, means military application, means a community college application, technical college, trade school. I don't care. Every application is valuable. Every application is exciting. Every application is worth celebrating. And every application is important in Apply Kansas. And so that's the most important thing, is encouraging students to think beyond what they know and learn, but also to find their best fit, their best path, and their best fit for beyond high school, and let them lead the way in that process. That's what Apply Kansas is all about. So those are really the 3 required components of every Apply Kansas event. So with that being said, you get to take a look at some of the numbers. So you can see this year we had 198 schools register across the state, which is half of the high schools in the state of Kansas, which is exciting to me. Of those 198 schools, we got data back from 160 of them, which is not all of them. I know I said it was required. It's not all of them. And I've decided I'm never going to get all of them, but 160 is actually really good. We had 160 schools reporting data is more than we had registered last year. So I'll take that number any day of the week. And it also tells me that we've got some site coordinators out there working really hard to get that data and work with their students. So I'm excited about that. In those 160 schools, that represents 19,000 seniors. And in that data, 10,000 of those seniors represented and answered some questions for us. So you can kind of see, where those numbers are coming from. So 14,000 applications were submitted this October that came through this data for us. And of those 160 schools, 101 of them, or 63% of those schools, have 40% or higher students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. So we're not just recruiting the schools that are already sending students to college and already doing a good job, filling out applications. We're recruiting everybody. All high schools in Kansas are invited to be a part of Apply Kansas. Another important figure too is of those 198 schools that registered, 48 of them were brand new schools, brand new to Apply Kansas. And that's also a number I like to track because it tells me we're reaching new places. And again, you can kind of see too, we're up that 63% for economically disadvantaged students. That's up from 58. So we're increasing that number too. And that, again, going back to our mission and making sure that we're reaching those underrepresented populations, that's a target that I want to keep my eye on as well. So we'll keep those numbers in our back pocket here. And now we're going to look at how do those numbers fare over the last 4 years? How has this looked? So you can kind of see over last year, we're up 27% in site participation. We're up 29% in student participation, and we're up 26% in application submission. So we're seeing some really good gains this year. In those metrics that we've been measuring since the creation of Apply Kansas and since I took on Apply Kansas. But I also wanted to take a look at Apply Kansas since we started just with KBOR in 2020. And you can see we're almost at 100% increase since we brought it in-house. And that's really exciting to me too. We're almost up 100% in every single category. And that's including a pandemic. So, so we've got some really great numbers and things to be excited about going on across Kansas. And I think more importantly, we've got a great foundation to build upon. Those 14,000 applications, this is a breakdown I started doing last year. And again, remember, every application is a celebration. And I think that's why this pie chart for me is so important, because I want to show folks where our applications are going and that it truly is valued. Yes, university applications are probably the most complicated, and they're going to get some of the attention that we have in Apply Kansas. But at the same time, we're going to celebrate and value all of those applications. And working with, generally, school counselors are the ones working as site coordinators. They are using those students' individual plans of study to help guide them to reach those goals. So again, it's very much in line with the language that KSDE is wanting to use in each of the high schools and supporting those post-secondary transitions and planning. So, so you can see, and again, the breakdown of these applications is very consistent with what we had last year. About 60% are going to four-year institutions, about 25% are going to our community colleges. This year was a new breakout. I broke out the technical colleges and trade programs and community colleges, each into their own categories this year. They were differently labeled last year, and we found it a little confusing. So I think this will be better metrics to track moving forward. And you can also see about 8,600 of our applications went to our Kansas public institutions. So, which I feel is just a good number to have, being KBOR. Engagement is another metric. It's hard to put your finger on. So I've trying to find ways to look at that and measure that for us, because again, it tells us how our site coordinators are doing and how the program's working. So if you look at, you know, who's planning FAFSA events, who's doing senior signing events, that's not a part of Apply Kansas. But you can see that, you know, 86% of our Apply Kansas schools are planning to participate in or do a FAFSA event. 74% are planning to do a senior signing event or, you know, something like that. And so those optional events, those things that we've kind of labeled as best practice for post-secondary planning are happening as a result of the Apply Kansas campaign. You can also see too that of our 198 registered schools, 150 of those were returning. So they've already been Apply Kansas schools. At some point in time, 48 of those were first-time schools. And in that first-time category, 77% of those submitted data. Now, that's the hard part. They could very easily do this application stuff for their students and not send me any data. And 77% of them went ahead and did it. So they believe in what we're doing. They believe in the power of what this is about enough to have their students take a survey for me. So I love that number. And automatically 64% signed up and said, yes, I'm absolutely coming back next fall. So overall, we've got 149 of our schools that are automatically coming back for next October, and I'm pleased about that. So, you know, 93% of our schools are returning. And I think a big part of that growth in sites that we saw this year had to do with our fall training program. This year was the first year that we did a partnership with our higher education institutions, and I did 7 training events in person, combined those with a 90-minute Apply Kansas training, and then a counselor college visit or a counselor college fair. And so it was a half-day professional development event. And so site coordinators got their Apply Kansas training, and they got to learn about an institution here in Kansas, and they could pick their location. And so I really do think being able to get out in the communities, we did 7 of those in person, and we did 2 online. And you can see, you know, we had about 130 participants across the state do one of the trainings. And this is the first year training really wasn't optional, or wasn't optional. So I'm pleased about how our site coordinators were able to plug in this year. And I think it made a difference in, again, how we got all the other pieces to fall into place. So you heard about the AllStar high schools last June. We recognized 54 AllStar high schools. Now, AllStar high schools are the ones that do 3 events in the course of an academic year. They do an Apply Kansas application event, they do a FAFSA completion event, and they support a FAFSA completion event, and then they do a senior signing day, all in the same academic year. If they do that, they tell me that at the end of the school year, they got this banner to take back to their school and be recognized as an AllStar high school. We had 54 in our inaugural year of the AllStar high school program. 110 schools indicated that they were aiming for that AllStar status this year. So, you know, I don't know that we'll hit all the way to 110, but I love the fact that they're looking for that recognition and trying that. Again, these are identified, I think, as best practice activities to get that college going culture into their community year after year. So I'm excited to see that program take off. this is a new thing I haven't shared with you before. And this is our School of Excellence Award winner. The American College Application Campaign allows us to nominate one of our schools each year. Last year, we nominated East High School in Wichita. They do a really big Apply Kansas event, and so we were able to give them a national award for their Apply Kansas event. And this year, in conjunction with the Apply Kansas Steering Committee, we're nominating a group of small rural high schools, the Flint Hills College Consortium. And they came together. This is the second year they've done this, but they've, under the direction of Janella Newton, who is K-12 counselor at Lebo and Waverly High Schools. She's also the college and career readiness coordinator for that district. She has been pulling together high schools in their area and coordinating the Apply Kansas event with Flint Hills Technical College. So Flint Hills sponsors the Apply Kansas event, and any high school in the area that wants to join in can bring their students to Flint Hills on that day together. And when they sign up, Janella handles all of the training, runs point for every communication that I send out. And she does that for all of the counselors and the site coordinators in this group. This year they had 5 high schools join up together. And they hosted the event at Flint Hills Tech. Obviously, Flint Hills was on hand helping students fill out their applications, but so was Emporia State, so was Kansas Wesleyan, so was Manhattan Christian College, and so was Kansas Works. So they had a group of different institutions and different representation to support those students in this area. And I love being able to recognize the work of these small rural high schools in their community coming together to do an event like this for their students. And so they're going to be able to earn this School of Excellence Award this year. And I'm actually hoping that we'll be able to present on this program at the national conference for all of the state coordinators in May later on this spring in Washington, D.C. too. So we'll see, but I'm excited to recognize that program this year. So last couple things, what's on the horizon for Apply Kansas? This is my big dream, and kind of talking back to Regent Lane's point about data challenges earlier today. I'm trying to connect the college going rate by high school building, because I'd love to be able to show Apply Kansas high schools and their college going rate versus non-Apply Kansas high schools and their college going rate. So we can start looking at that, because I believe these are the activities that start moving that and creating that college going culture. And so the only way we're going to be able to tell is if we can measure the data. And if I can't get the data, then I can't measure it, right? So I want to start measuring that this year. The other thing that I was interested in is looking at the KSDE success rate. And this is something that they measure over at KSDE. This is something that's part of their accreditation. But they look at percent of high school students who meet one of the following qualifications 2 years after graduation. So they either have an industry recognized certification, a higher degree, or they're still enrolled. And so I would love to measure both of those things and be able to do that at a building level and be able to track that each year, because I think that could be really powerful, both for Apply Kansas buildings and for our AllStar High School buildings. Because again, I believe that this is the work that starts moving the needle, but the only way we start seeing it is if we can collect the numbers. So, and you've gotten to see this before, and I'm a little bit of a math nerd, I've been told, but I love putting this together each year. I love seeing the dots fill up our state. You can see that wherever there's a star, that's a brand new school this year, and as many green dots as there are on that state, they're not enough. There's still some open space, and I know there's high schools in there that we can still find. So 200 high schools is not all the high schools in Kansas yet, and I'm not done. So I know we've got 149, 93% of those schools are coming back next fall. That's a good foundation to build on. And so we're going to keep putting some green dots on that map for next year. But I'm excited with the progress that we've made and where we are today. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about Apply Kansas.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I just love your enthusiasm. And I think this is an outstanding program and you're having such great progress in a short period of time. So thank you very much. One question.
Yeah, of course.
College going rate in the National Clearinghouse leaves out that group of kids that go on to military. How do we capture that? How do we lift that up as it's, we use the word college. Most people think of one thing. How do we broaden that? So it's any post-secondary that we're wanting to celebrate, right?
That is an excellent question. And I would love, so one of the things that I'm going to go listen for when I go to this convening is what they call it in Washington, DC in May, is listen to how other states do that and how they collect that data and see if there's some good ways to find out how to do that. That was the other piece. I don't know that the success rate would get at that either, but that's the thing I liked about KSCE's success rate is because it casts a broader net and we can get some of the industry credentials and some of the other things, but I still don't think we get military in that.
Yeah.
So I don't know yet, but I am all ears and open for ideas because I want to find a measure that will capture all of the different places our Kansas high school students go. Because again, that's what this work is about.
So follow up.
Mhm.
I appreciate the data at this high level. I'm wondering if you have eyes on data that shows the opportunity equity gaps that we might have. So we're looking at this not only by high school, but by who in the high school is actually participating. If not now, that might be a good next step for us because it ties directly to some of our success issues.
Yeah, that's something, and that's something that there again, that's another measure that some of our other states are doing, and that I can add to our survey. Self-reported, so sometimes I get nervous about that, but I would love to see that too. Again, if we could see who's participating, and sometimes there's a program and something we may be able to use in Zello even that could get more granular for us as well. So I think there's definitely a lot of places to grow there. I'd love to be able to see, boy, if we could get down to this student participated in Apply Kansas and this student matriculated to this place. Oh my gosh, I would love to find a way to do that. And they're talking about it. I can't wrap my head around it yet, but I don't know how we do it in Kansas yet. But I would love to find a way to make that happen for sure. So thank you.
Tara, this was exciting when I first heard you present on it a few years ago, and it just keeps getting better and better. Thank you for your enthusiasm and your work.
Madam Chair, Tara, I realize this would vary according to each school, but do you feel like as a whole, our Apply Kansas schools have a robust family communication strategy so that not just students know about these events, but families, particularly when you're talking about at-risk students where maybe they don't have parents at home, maybe they're grandparents or somewhere else. Do you feel like the schools are also focusing on making sure that the families are aware of these events?
So I think it's going to vary by community. I think part of the initiative is to bring Apply Kansas and bring those Apply events to the school and give school day time to students to fill out applications with support so that not so much is sent home. With that being said, I think sometimes there could be a possible disconnect, but one of the things that we have to talk about a lot in our training is the preparation you need to do on the front end of that to have a successful in-school event. So you can't just say, hey, come into school and fill out your applications, because there's personal information and credit card information and things like that students will be like, I don't have this, And so I don't think it works without some of that connection, but I can't say across the board it's automatically happening. But certainly with the conversations that I've had and the trainings that we've had, the schools that are doing it the best are sending lots of information home, sending, hey, collect this, come back, and then we'll come and help you, and are working individually with students where they're at and with their families. And to some extent, that's kind of the magic of school counselors also. But at the same time, it looks different. It looks different in every high school. So
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could add, Tara does a fabulous job on her website for resources for family communication.
Good.
She has just outlined so many resources for the school counselors for family communication.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, we are moving right along and on track to meet my time deadline so we can get over to the Capitol. Next meeting on February the 28th, of course, items for our agenda will move the Math Pathways presentation by Daniel Archer that we've postponed. We'll hear concurrent enrollment cost model presentations from Clifton Clyde, which is USD 224, and Butler Community College. The KU MC request for specialty program accreditation will have new program approvals. Regent Lane, do you anticipate that there'll be anything to report on from supporting metrics for the dashboard, or are we too early for anything
I
there?
think the support metrics conversations need to begin happening in the same way that we started with foundational. So probably not a report out if anyone here is interested in participating in that next grouping where we start talking about those. Let me know and I'll make sure you get in the conversation.
Perfect. Sounds good. I would also suggest that we add just a Gen Ed package update. If that is appropriate timing. I know we've got some timeline things that Daniel's put together, but I think it's just good to keep touching base on that, make sure everything is moving along according to schedule.
Madam Chair, what are you thinking about in terms of discussing the RPK report and thinking about how that impacts our work?
That was my next thing that I was going to say. I think we need to have that on there as well. So let's add some discussion time for that.
Thank you.
Regent Kiplinger, if I may, I was in the SCOPS meeting and the universities all reported out on their progress of their Gen Eds. A majority are on schedule to implement fall of 23 ahead of schedule.
Fabulous. Well done. All right. Anything else that people would add? If we have all of that on our February 28th meeting, do you think we might just plan that we might need to run a little longer since that's a virtual meeting? Regents, make mental note that we might not be done in an hour. Still start at the same time. All right, if there's nothing else to come before us, I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. And I said aye, by the way, too.
Yeah.